Galactic Standard Date. Year 11356. Day 88. Sol Standard Date 3 of the 31st, 3267. Catherine was just waking up to a new fun-filled day when the idea hit her. She sat bolt upright in her bed and yelled, "They haven't seen any movies yet!" Catherine threw on her clothes and flew out of her bedroom, heading towards the new ambassadorial residences. Soran was researching the Terran anatomy books when Catherine knocked on his door. "Are you awake, Soran? I have a neat thing to show you," she said happily. Soran shut down his VR suite and looked to the wall where he could see the outline of a door. "Give me just a moment, my lady, I will be right out," he said, as he threw on his ambassadorial garments that he had customized earlier that day to look somewhat suitable to being serving under a goddess. Soran hit the button for the door and kneeled, before it had even finished evaporating. Catherine waited for the door to prove away, only to see the Ateni ambassador kneeling down in the doorway. "What you doing, hun? Did you lose something? Here, let me help you," she said, as she knelt down and reached a hand out to Soran to help him up. Soran heard nothing over the pounding in his chest. The next thing he knew after he knelt was that his object of worship and admiration was extending her hand to him, beckoning him to her side. Soran reached out to her and pulled himself up into her hand. His heart started pounding more. He had been accepted as a follower. He knew that he had a duty to spread the word now. That would require him to leave his lady's side, but it was necessary. Whenever they left to go retrieve Valenthi's younger sister, he would request the time necessary to go recruit a following. Catherine just looked at the Ateni, who had curled onto her hand and somewhat up her arm. He looked so happy and determined she forgot about the whole dropping something bit that had happened, as she let out a happy sigh and headed towards Valthan's room. Valthan heard a knock at his door and threw down his tools and his Engineering for Dummies book as he raced to hit the button, hoping that it was his lordship coming to teach him the ways of Ascendant Engineering. Instead, he was greeted by the other Ascendant, Catherine, along with his fellow Ateni. "Hello, your ladyship. What may I do for you today?" he said, bowing deeply. Catherine just smiled and said, "Oh my, what a gentle mouse you are! I only have one thing I want right now, and that's to share one of my favourite movies to you little guys. It's a classic from 2035, but we are going to watch the remastered version in VR," she said, as she waved to Valthan for him to follow her to Valenthi's room. Valenthi was in the middle of a full sprint on her wheel when she heard the knock. She got startled and tripped, which brought her full circle a few times before allowing her to deposit herself on the floor. She stood up and steadied herself as she heard another set of knocks. "Give me a minute, please. I was exercising and I would like to dress myself appropriately," she said, as she grabbed her ambassador's robes and a handheld paper fan from her people. Catherine waited as patiently as she petted Soran. Finally, the door fell away into dust to reveal the Ateni, who was giving a little bow with a paper fan in hand, and Catherine couldn't handle the cute little fan in her tiny hands, so she squeezed and picked up Valenthi with her other arm, much to Soran's dismay. "Aww, I can't wait to see how you guys react to this movie. It's made from an author who started out on an old internet website called Reddit that died out in 2022. Some of those authors that were writing in this subgenre called HFY were actually pretty close to how the future really panned out. A few conspiracy theorists think that humanity actually used to be able to see the future because of that," she said while laughing. "The movies we are going to watch are called The Wrath of Vuxten, He Who is Wreathed in Love and Wrath, and we are going to be watching these back to back, baby." Catherine walked to an empty room and set the nanites to fab up a VR theatre while she set up the measurements on the Ateni for the movie. They were each going to get to experience Vuxten's battles on Telkan after biological warfare had been initiated. She was so excited she began to shuffle around in place while the room finished setting up. "As a heads up, these might be a little scary." The three Ateni shrugged it off. Their people had horror movies. This shouldn't be too scary. After the room had finished, Catherine immediately threw the little wire headset they had put on after laying down. Their whole world changed. They could feel, smell, taste, hear and see in the world. Almost better than the real world. Soran gagged at the taste of a world that consisted of nothing but death and despair, assaulted all five senses. His visor flashed, "Atomic! Atomic! Atomic!" Then he felt the planet itself quake in fear and agony. He wanted to huddle down and hide, but then he started moving along without any real input. Then he remembered that he was in a movie and had no way to actually do anything, He was just along for the ride. This thought calmed him until a tree developed a mouth with large serrated teeth and tried to eat him before a bug that was atop his shoulder shot with an itty-bitty rifle. Valenthe was dropped into a forest where she was leading a group of soldiers that appeared to be a mix of Terran and whatever she was supposed to be inhabiting. She then threw up a closed fist and told the group to spread out. Something was wrong. They were overlooking a lake that she had recently visited, but it seemed wrong somehow. Then her eyes landed on it. There was an island in the center of the lake that hadn't been there the week before. She opened up with every weapon she had in her arsenal as she sounded the retreat to her group. An array of missiles, grenades, and bullets impacted the island, which just seemed to piss it off, as then it stood to its full height and bore down upon Valenthe, who was still shooting wildly into the creature's massive fanged maw. The creature slammed its face towards her to try and eat her, but she pulled out a wicked-looking chainsword and jabbed it into his face, being brought up with it as he recoiled. She was then notified of a new meme scrolling past her eyesight as she screamed in rage and fury, cutting into the creature that was over 100 times her size. "This lake is reserved for podlings," scrolled across her sightline as she buried the chainsaw to the hilt and began to make mincemeat of the creature's brain. "Welcome, Foxten. You will find 1 day's pay for dirtying the lake," played across her vision as she fell to the ground along with the giant that she had felled. Valfan was dead, yet he was alive. All he could feel was love and wrath for scorched Talcan. He stood in front of the unending tides of enemies before him, a lone man who needed nothing more than his love and rage to sustain him through battle. He fired shoulder-mounted missile launchers into the masses as he waded into the mass of flesh with his chainsword in a bloody dance of death that left nothing but the pulp remains of his enemies in his wake. Valfan started laughing harder than he ever had before. "So this is true power? This is the power of the gods? I will try my best to reach your heights, Jason," he said, as he impaled a 15-foot-long creature that was covered in venomous spikes.